Hello, everyone. Welcome to Room for Discussion. Today, we will have the fourth interview of our Israel-Palestine series, as events are currently unfolding and a ceasefire has gone into effect last Sunday in Gaza. We are delighted to speak to scholars who can help us understand the conflict in its broader context. This Tuesday, Nadim Rouhana gave us insights into his understanding about the conflict and his vision for a more equitable future for both Israelis and Palestinians.
So today we are delighted to welcome Hillel Cohen. He is a professor of Islamic studies and the Middle East at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and the author of many books on the history of Israelis and Palestinians. He deliberately does not only focus on the Israeli narrative, but also includes Palestinian understandings of history. He's once described his methodology as, "When a source makes me feel uncomfortable, I know that I have to use it."
Like in our last interview, there will be extensive room for audience questions after each section. So first, we will look at the events of 1929 and its influence on the conflict. Second, we will take a more abstract look at the history of the conflict. And last, we will take a look into the future. My name is Gabe.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And now let us give a warm welcome to Hillel Cohen. Hillel, we are glad to have you here at Room for Discussion. Thank you for traveling all the way from Jerusalem. So you've described in a previous interview with Michael Deckel that as a young man you lived in the West Bank. Could you describe your experiences at the time?
Well, maybe I exaggerated a bit when I said that I lived as a young man in the West Bank. What I meant is when I was about 15 and a half, I left high school. It was too boring for me. And at that time I'm an Israeli Jew. I'm from Orthodox Jewish family. But even earlier, I started to study Arabic. I don't know why I was attracted to the language. Because I live in Jerusalem, as you probably know, Jerusalem is today 40% of Jerusalem population are Palestinians. When I was young, it was about 30%. But Palestinians live in the old city of Jerusalem, and the old city of Jerusalem, of course, is an area that everybody want to go there because this is the heart of Jerusalem, and this is the heart of the Holy Land, and this is the heart actually of the globe. So I used to go there, and then I was attracted to Arabic, and I started to talk, of course, very broken Arabic at the beginning. But I also started to communicate with people, and mainly elderly Palestinians. And they were very welcoming. So I arrived I was invited to shops, I invited to houses. And the same, not only in the old city of Jerusalem, but also in the villages and refugee camps of the West Bank. So I was in a kind of strange situation because I was actually a settler, an Israeli settler. I moved to live and to study in a settlement in the West Bank. So a couple of hours a day, I used to learn in a yeshiva, in a Jewish religious school. And I used to study that the land of Israel is ours, and we have the right to settle everywhere, and so on and so forth. And a few hours later, I would go to the refugee camp near the settlement. It was the Jalazun refugee camp. On between Ramallah and Nablus, and people there used to tell me about the Nakba, about the disaster of 1948, about Palestinian history. So in this way, I lived in the West Bank, but I lived twice. I mean, two lives, if I may say. So this is my experience of living in the West Bank for a while.
Would you say that having this experience would still be possible today?
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean, the atmosphere in the late 70s, early 80s, it's not that there was a peaceful cooperation between Jews and Arabs, Israeli and Palestinians. Of course, there was struggle. I mentioned the Nakba of 48, and then was the war of 67 and the settlement. So there's all the time, there was tension all the time. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, in the interpersonal level, most people didn't feel this kind of hatred. I mean, I mean, even if you are radical right-wing, I mean, I can tell about my parents, for example. I wouldn't say they were radical, but they were Orthodox Jews, believe that the land is ours. But okay, they are Palestinian, Arabs here, they have the right to live, we don't have right to do anything wrong to them. You know, we don't have to kill them, they don't have to kill us. I mean, we can live peacefully together. Of course, there is the question of sovereignty. Who would be sovereign? Who would rule the country? Okay, we can leave it. We can live peacefully now. So this was the atmosphere, in a sense, among many, many people. So it was very common that, you know, you have Palestinians that work with you, you would invite them to your house, and Palestinians would invite you to their houses. Yeah. And also the culture, I can speak now not about my culture, so it's dangerous, but the Palestinian culture changed very much in these 40 years that passed from the 80s. First of all, I mean, the population, Palestinian population is now more or less twice than it was before. I mean, in 67, there were in the West Bank 600,000 Palestinians. Now there are, I don't know, 3 million. So it's 5 times. So every village much more densely populated. And the social contacts are very different from what we used to meet many years earlier. So this is one aspect. And the other aspect is suspicion. I mean, not that there was no suspicion between Jews and Arabs in the 70s and the 80s. There was a degree of suspicion. But after the first Intifada and then after the second Intifada, it became very dangerous for Palestinians to invite Israelis home because maybe he's an intelligence agent, maybe he worked for the Shabak, the Mukhabarat, maybe and maybe and maybe. So there is a lot of suspicion and people prefer not to. And the same is true for Israelis. I mean, better that you do not, you cannot trust them, you better do not have contact with them.
Yeah.
In a sense, of course, it's not complete, but this is part of it.
Yeah, times have changed. So if we look at your work as a historian, you have written extensively on the year 1929 in shaping the two narratives, the Israeli and the Palestinian ones. You call this year the year zero of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Can you tell us why you define 1929 as the starting point of this conflict?
Yeah, of course, 1929 is not the starting point of the conflict because the conflict, it depends how we define the conflict. If the conflict is a religious conflict, say Jewish-Muslim conflict, so the Jewish-Muslim conflict started in the days of Prophet Muhammad because there was tension between Jews and Muslims during this period, and Muhammad ordered to kill, you know, the Jews of Banu Qurayza, one of the Jewish tribes in Arabia. So it really depends how we define the conflict. But even if we look at the conflict not from religious, but rather from national perspective, and we say, okay, this is a national struggle, it didn't start in 29 because there were even bloody attacks in early 20s and even 1920s and even before. And even if we prefer the colonial framework to understand this conflict, it's also true that it didn't start in 29. It didn't start in 29, but 1929 was the event in which there were many attacks in the same week by Arabs on Jewish communities in many areas of Palestine, the land of Israel. I mean, in Jerusalem, in Hebron, in Safad, in Moza, in Faruria, in Gaza. There was a small community, Jewish community in Gaza in the 20s. And all these communities were attacked in the same week, same 10 days. And for the Zionists who arrived in Palestine, you know, they started to arrive in Palestine as Zionists, not as Jews, in 1882. They truly believed, this is how I see it. I mean, I know that other people see it differently. But most Zionists believe that they can come to Palestine and live peacefully with the Arabs, that they bring such prosperity to the country, they bring, they build hospitals or clinics, and they give job opportunities and so on and so forth, that the Arabs would be, not only accept them, but would be glad that there are, Jews who come mainly from Europe to the Middle East and settle among them. What happened in 1929 was that because of these attacks on all these Jewish communities, they realized that the opposition or rejection of the Arabs to the idea of Jewish homeland in Palestine is so strong that the only way for the Zionist movement to continue its mission or its project is by becoming more and more strong and powerful in the military sense of the word, and also in the realm of foreign affairs. So if until 1929 they believed that they can live in peace with Palestinians, after that they said, okay, there is no way. And since that moment, we can see the kind of militarization of the Jewish society in Palestine. So this is why I call it the year zero of the conflict. And since then, you can see that, to be a leader in Israel, you have to be a kind of general or member of the special unit.
Yeah. And you also show that the events which you've spoken about in this year are narrated very different in the Zionist or Jewish Israeli narrative and in the Palestinian narrative. Could you explain to us maybe the main differences in the telling of this story?
Yeah. So if what I said previously is that a kind of fact, and the fact was that many Jewish communities were attacked by Arabs, and 136 Jews were killed. These are facts in the various towns that I mentioned. These are facts. But now, what you do with facts, as a historian or as a politician or as a storyteller, what would you do with facts? What we do with facts, we use them politically and historically and nationally in order that to bring an idea, in order that we can talk about our beliefs and our ideology. So, for Palestinians, and I talked with many Palestinians about this event. Some of them were not aware of this event. I mean, they heard vaguely. Some of them were aware of it, and they knew that there was Intifada in 1929. They didn't know, for example, about these people who entered houses and killed, a father with his son. They were not aware of it. And the people, the Palestinians who murdered these families and were hanged by the British, they were called martyrs. But the people who called them martyrs, and I asked many, they didn't know what they do, what they did in 1929. They knew that they were hanged by the British, but they didn't know the facts. So I started to study what Israeli Jews know about it and what Palestinians know about the events today, and what they knew about it in the 30s and what they knew about it in the days after the events. And it was very easy to see how each nation, so to speak, or the speakers of each nation, they choose or cherry pick part of the events. For example, for me, it was so surprising to learn, and I learned it from Palestinian sources, that there was also a massacre of a Palestinian family by a Jewish member of the Haganah in Jaffa in the same week. And that there were some Palestinians who were lynched by Jewish mob in the same week. Okay, when I realized it, this was the moment that I understood how deep is the gap between the narratives that are told by each society. I said, how come that I didn't know it? I'm a historian. When I came to write this book, I already had my PhD on the history of the Mandate period. It's not that I have PhD on King Edward or whatever. No, this is a period that I studied, and I didn't know about these events. I had to go to Palestinian sources and then to files of the British courts in order to find about these events. For Palestinians, it's vice versa. In order to know about what they did and the atrocities that they committed, they have really to make a special effort to know it. Because this is our tendency. Our tendency is to turn a blind eye towards our atrocities and to focus on the atrocities that committed on us or to us.
Yes. So you even talk about in your work about that there was even a case of mutual cooperation, so Palestinians helping out Israelis during this massacre. Why do you think this is left out?
Yes, this is also very interesting, because during this study, what I found out is it is very known among Jews that many Jews were saved by Palestinian Arabs during these events. You know, dozens of Jews, maybe hundreds of Jews in Hebron were hidden by Palestinians who didn't let the mob to attack them. This is very well known, and we know the names of the families and so on and so forth. But we didn't know about Jews who rescued Arabs. And I found a couple of cases where Jews rescued Arabs. And I thought, why we don't know that? I mean, this is a kind of generosity. It can portray the Jews of Palestine in a better light, and so on and so forth. And then I realized that if you tell about Jews who rescued, it means that you say that there were also Jewish mobs who tried to attack. So let's forget about the Jews who rescued and forget about the Jewish attackers. So this is part of the story. Sometimes you have to hide also positive things in order to create your narrative of the just and the victim.
That's really interesting. I think this is a great time to also look at the audience for our first round of audience questions. Anyone has a question? Yeah,
Yes, in the back.
Hi, you said about like the knowledge gap between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I was wondering, does that exist still in context of the illegal settlements? Do you think that many Israelis still don't know about it, or do just don't care?
Don't know about what?
Illegal settlements.
I think we have to differentiate between knowledge about facts and debate about legality and laws. It's not the same. So what you call illegal settlements, they would call legal settlements. So what I mean is it's a different kind of gap. It's gap about the way you understand the international law. Okay, so we have many kinds of gaps. There's gaps in knowledge of facts. There is gaps in the way you feel. I mean, in a sense, certain issues, and there are gaps about legality and about such issues.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the illegal settlements which are found by international courts to be illegal.
Yes. So
all settlements that are now, when we talk about the West Bank, they are internationally seen as illegal. Israel, there's a difference between ones that are legal and ones that even for Israel are illegal. So there's a difference here between Israeli law and what international law thinks.
Yeah. So in these issues, Israel does not accept the definition of the international law regarding the settlements. There is a debate whether the territories I say territories, I mean the West Bank and Gaza, but especially the West Bank, whether they are occupied territories according to international law or they are not. So the International Court of Justice decided that it is an occupied territory. There is an Israeli interpretation according to which, because there was no recognized sovereignty over the West Bank before 67, it was under the rule of Jordan, but the rule of Jordan was not recognized by the international community between 49 and 67. This is a time where Jordan was the ruler of this area. Because it was not recognized, so when Israel entered, it didn't occupy it from a recognized sovereign. So this is why it's not occupied territory. This is Israeli explanation. I guess there is a tiny minority of professionals who accept it, but just for your knowledge.
Yeah. I think for time, we have more audience questions. So if there is more, and also maybe you can ask the question after the interview or follow up on it. But we wanted to speak about something which is very similar to this. So thank you very much for the question, which is, you've said before that a narrative or the creation of a narrative is to a large extent a bottom-up process in which the people create it. But on the other hand, those, like top-down forces such as courts, such as governments, also play a decisive role in shaping a narrative. Could you explain to us how, and also as a historian and as a person who tries to find the truth, how you deal with that?
Thank you for assuming that I'm trying to find the truth.
And do you?
There is time for question afterwards.
Okay.
First of all, when we speak about historians, I mean, I don't think that this is what most historians do, to try to find the truth. What is truth? I mean, it's so complicated, and we don't have enough time to talk about it. So when we speak about Israeli and Palestinian historians, just to take it as an example, but it's true, I guess, for any history of conflict. It's not when we deal with other histories, but with histories of conflict, I think we can see three schools, so to speak, of historians. There is one main school, I would say, that their goal as historians is to prove that we are right. And the we can be the Palestinian we, the Arab we, the Israeli we, the Zionist we are right. Now, it's not that they are, I don't mean that they try to change history or, no, it's natural, it is done naturally. I mean, you see what you see and you don't see what is inconvenient for you to see. So I can tell you, it's very, very interesting. You can see, I don't know, I wish I could make a kind of serious research about it, but I did it in another way. You can see two people, historians, who read the same files in the same archives, and they write totally two different articles about, I give a real example, about Israeli policy towards its Arab citizens, and especially in the issue of land, okay? So in one article you would read that the Israeli authorities, they took land from the Arabs, they confiscated land, they built settlements on this land and so on and so forth, and they bring, from the files of the Israeli archives, proof for that. And the other historians, and it's a real case, you're right, look how generous is the Israeli authorities. It's true that it's confiscated land, but if you build hospital, of course, Arabs also go to the same hospital. If you build roads, Arabs also use the roads. So don't say that we take from the Arabs and give to the Jews. Many land that are confiscated are going to the public good, which is both Arab and Jews, for example. So you can see that you use the same material or sources, but you tell the story that is part of your system, actually, beforehand. So I don't think that either of these historians did it in purpose, but this is what they see in the files. This person sees in the files that Israel is a great democratic state, and this person sees in the files that Israel is a discriminatory state. And both are right, of course. And this is the third school, my school, I mean, and of course with many others, that what we are trying to see is how come that people came with such contradictory results from the same material. And we understand the way historians think, and then we understand how, people who are not historians. What do I mean? When I say that the tension that you mentioned, Elizabeth, that the tension between, the narrative from up and the narrative from below. Usually we are told that, narrative is from the school, the teachers, the curriculum, the ceremonies. This is what all these create our narratives. This is true, but there is something much more crucial as I understand it. And the more crucial point is our own emotions. And what does it mean? It means that if there is a battle, a war, a clash, whatever, between Israelis and Palestinians, and 5 Israelis were killed and 5 Palestinians were killed. So a Palestinian, it can baby or youth or old person, anyone, of course, his emotions would be with the Palestinians who were killed. Who cares about the Israelis? So 5 Israelis were killed. Who cares? And for the Israelis, of course, vice versa. Who cares about the Palestinians who were killed? Our brothers were killed. So in this sense, every person creates his own narrative when he hears about it. And the narrative is based on his emotions towards people who feel closer to. So he feels about his own nation. So he tells the story of the victims of his own side or her own side, how they were lovely, how they were treated their moms, how they were in high school, how they used to help everybody. So they tell it about their own victims or martyrs, and we will tell it about our own martyrs. And of course, we were attacked without reason. Everybody would say we were attacked without reason. And you have here two narratives without school and without a minister of education and a president of the state. This is how it is built. And then you add the state institutions that give it more power.
Yeah. If we build on that, how that works out in public discourse about history, you've, for example, also been criticized for accepting the other side's narrative and especially admitting your own side's wrongdoings. So how do you respond to those who accuse you of giving the other side ammunition?
I say thank you for your interesting opinion. What can I say? I mean, you don't want to hear, don't listen. I mean, it is true. I was accused. I wouldn't say even accused. I mean, blamed or whatever. That I was asked, and in Israel, this is a term, maybe in other places as well. Are you from the United Nations that you bring all sides as equal? I say, no, I'm not from the United Nations. I'm an Israeli Jew. And I believe that if we want to understand the environment that we live in, and if we want to understand the conflict that takes so many lives of ours and of Palestinians, so we have to really understand the point of view of the other side. And this I say also when I used to be invited also to Palestinian institutions or audiences or to give lecture. I say you have to understand, you don't have to accept anything. But if you don't understand what Zionism is about, if you don't understand why Jews arrived in Palestine, you don't care about the history of the Jewish people, okay, you will feel that you have all the justice on your side. Okay, fine. What next? You can die just, be killed just. And the same to the Israelis. Okay, you are just and dead. What happened? What's the point? Why not to try to understand? Okay, many people don't want to understand. And they believe that, the justice is undivided. I don't think so. I think justice can be divided and can be more and more like empathy can be divided, can be to everybody.
One aspect that we found very interesting is that it is very admirable how you see both narratives. However, there is kind of undeniably also a difference in power between the two sides. Not only in a very, very physical way, but also in the way of like creating and maintaining a narrative, right? So how do you deal with this power imbalance when telling the two narratives? Can one do that even? Take that into account?
The truth is that I do what I can do. And everybody has the word or whatever, can write whatever he or she wants. So I try to tell something, one thing. I call myself one trick pony. I know what I know. I can tell what I tell. I think that to understand both narratives is very important. I think this is the only way. I wouldn't say the only way, but this can be a way to try to start moving towards better future. Okay, so yeah, I cannot be. I'm not objective. For example, I'm not anti-Zionist, and for anti-Zionist, I mean, for Zionists, I understand the Palestinians too much, and for anti-Zionists, I don't understand them enough. For Zionists, I don't understand the Zionists enough, and okay, so I'm one person. This is the way I see it. This is what I understand. This is what I can tell. But everybody can tell what he or she wants, and then we create something which give presence to more voices and help more people to understand better the situation. We don't have anything more than that to do.
Mm. Yeah. So building on that, we'll now have the second round of audience questions. I think here in the front.
Maybe, yeah. You with the green cardigan. Oh.
Okay. I also like to assume that you are seeking the truth. While I'm a peace professional, I know that the first victim of every conflict is the truth. So one type is false flag operations. Do you know the definition of false flag operations? The one example of the Second World War was ab 5 Uhr heute Morgen wird zurückgeschossen. Hitler sent his soldiers to Poland to shoot at his border controls and so make sure, like, no, we were going to attack Poland. Did you find any of those false flag operations in what you studied? And I would like to be more precise on what happened 1.5 years ago. Because I know some Palestinians also feel this is also false flag operations. Also because IDF soldiers has said, no, our security system is too well. This cannot happen without us noticing. So.
I didn't get exactly the phrase. How you phrase it?
False flag operation.
False flag operation. I think in the history of the State of Israel, there were a couple of local false flag operations. I know a colleague of mine, Arij Sabar Khoury, she found out about one attack in 1948, in the War 48, on Kibbutz HaZoreah from the village of Kira, was a kind of, I mean, that Jewish soldiers who were the one to shoot the Israeli settlement, okay? And then they attacked the village. So there were very few, I think, cases like that. There were cases in which there was attempt to do that, and the Israeli government didn't let it happen. It's very complicated story. And regarding October 7, I don't think so. Sure, it was not. It was a huge failure of the Israeli security establishment and the Israeli, of course, government. This kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for the audience questions. Um, we now want to come a little bit more, to the presence, and also October 7th has already been mentioned. You've said in the previous interview that ignoring others brings up to October 7th. Could you explain to us what you mean by that?
Well, when we enter this minefield of October 7, we have to distinguish, I think, between different kinds of responsibility. So first of all, the responsibility for killing civilians is on the people who kill civilians, being it Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Israeli soldiers or whatever. I mean, if you behave not according to the laws of war, you are responsible for what you did. But when we took a kind of a look, which is the broader, of course, we have to try to understand what are the processes who led Hamas to attack Israel. Like afterwards, what are the processes who led Israel to attack Gaza? So first of all, I mean, in the Israeli discourse, after the Hamas attack on Israel, many Israelis said, okay, now we know that this is the true nature of the Palestinians. They are murderers. They want only to kill us. They always wanted only to kill us. And you see, this is what they did because this is what they are. Mm. On the other hand, you can see Palestinians, and not only Palestinians, who look on what Israel did in Gaza, and the dozens of thousands of people who were killed, and they say, you see, this is the real nature of Zionism. It is about killing innocent people. And I don't accept any of these versions. I think that when we try to understand these things, we can say for sure, as far as we can sure in anything, of course, when we deal with history of if, but we can say more or less for sure that Israel wouldn't have attacked Gaza and killed dozens of thousands of innocent people if Israel wouldn't have been attacked beforehand. And we can also say that if there was no occupation and there was no Palestinian prisoners and there was no Israeli attempts, not only attempts, to enlarge the settlements and all what is known under the title of occupation, there was no attack on Israel on October 7. So we cannot understand or interpret events as they were there from the day of the creation. No, this is history. History is about to understand processes who led one to another. And also we have to know that when we deal with casualties? No, not casualties. Cause and effect.
Yeah, causality.
Causality. When we deal with causality in history and in human science is not causality in physics and sciences. I can tell you for sure that if I leave it, it would fall. But I cannot tell you for sure that if X would slap Y, he would be slapped back. I give you an example from the history of the Israeli-Arab conflict. You know, when we explain the War of 67, what we say usually, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, he entered with divisions of artillery and tanks to the Sinai and blocked the Suez Canal. And he said, I'm going to attack Israel. And Israel went to a preventive attack on Egypt and succeeded. Okay? So we say this happened because of this. But this didn't happen because of this. Of course, this is part of the process, but this is not like if I leave, let it fall, it falls. What is the second example? In 1991, Iraq started to launch missiles on Israel. Saddam Hussein, missiles on Israel. The government of Israel decided not to react. So, had the government of Israel decided to react, we would say they reacted because of this. But this is not this. You see, they can decide to react, they can decide not to react. The same is October 7. You can be under occupation and attack only the army and not civilians. You can be the Israeli army after the October 7 and not attack civilians. So, causality?
Causality?
The causality is not exactly causality. The causality is always has to do also when we speak about human beings with the human agency. So we cannot say that what Hamas did was because of the occupation. It's because of the occupation, but in the sense that they could also have behaved in many, many different ways. And the same is true for the Israeli army. This is why it does not reveal the inner truth of any of these parties. It reveals a decision that was made in a very concrete moment in history for many, many reasons, many of them internal reasons, both in the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. Not only because of the occupation, because of the coalition. And this is true for Hamas and for Israel.
Yeah, it's almost like it gets normalized and becomes part of the narrative the moment it happens, and it couldn't be any other way. Another of the, which you describe as one of the root problems for why the conflict seems irreconcilable, is the fantasy of defeat. Could you explain what this entails?
I think that this is one of the main problems that we face in Israel-Palestine, is that at least in October 6, okay, and also in October 10, many Israelis believed that we can defeat the Palestinians. Many Palestinians believe that they can defeat the Israelis. For Palestinians, Hamas believed, okay, we entered the Negev, southern Israel. Hezbollah would enter from the north, the Houthis from Yemen, Iran from Iran, and Israel would be part of the history. There would not be Israel anymore. So they had this fantasy of defeating Israel. For many people, this is very nice fantasy. For many Israelis, they have the mirror fantasy. Okay, what are the Palestinians? They are nothing. I mean, okay, 4, 5, 6, 7 million people. Okay, we can deal with them. We can make some of them to go to Egypt, some of them from the West Bank to Jordan. Some of them would accept to live under Israeli rule, and there would not be Palestinian nation anymore, and we can settle everywhere that we want. So, as long as we have these fantasies of our ability to defeat the other, we don't want to compromise. We cannot accept that they have their own stories, their own justice, their own truth, and their own right to live peacefully and with dignity. And you can see it in both sides. So this is why I think that the more people give up fantasies and accept the existence of the other and the narrative of the other, not in the sense that everything that they say is true, but in the sense that what they tell about themselves, about their aspirations, about their sources, about their roots, you have to take it seriously and to deal with it seriously. Yeah. Now, if their narrative is only, I want to get rid of you, in both sides, of course, this would continue. But in both narratives, we have also other options. Yeah. And this is what we try to build on.
I strongly agree with that. I wanted to ask you, though, especially after everything that has happened, in the last 16 months, on October 7th, and, everything that has happened in Gaza, there has been a lot of trauma on both sides, and it seems very difficult to start to do that in each of the societies. How do you think people can get closer to this ability again.
I totally agree with you. At the moment, I think that for I don't know how many years we will have to deal with the traumatic effects of both sides.
Yeah.
What I can see, I teach at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. At the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I think about 15-20% of our students are Palestinians and 80% are Israeli Jews. And in our classes, I don't have huge classes. Only 20, 30 people come to my class. But what I see is that many of them, they really want dialogue with the other side, including Israelis who just came from Gaza and participated in the war or the attack on Gaza. And they sit in the same classroom and they discuss and they really want to hear. Now, I don't think that this represents anything about Israeli society, but it represents the possibility, the potential.
Yeah.
But there is a need, in both sides to decide what do we want? What do we want to do with your fantasies? Are you ready to give it up?
Yeah. We have now more time for audience questions. So if anyone has a question, in the very back, please.
Yeah.
If you can stand.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Just going back to the discourse on the emotional side of the conflict and what you just mentioned now on very opposing narratives, it's very understandable to me why people directly involved in the conflict would have such emotional takes, let's call them. But what I'm very surprised by is that even here in student bodies around the world as well, there's a lot of emotionality in the discourse. And I wanted to ask you, in your perspective, how does this shape the international narrative? And then is there someone who has the power then to bring back nuance to people who are not directly involved in the trauma that you just described?
First of all, I think there is a question to you, which is, to you, I mean to all of you, but you can give him them. I mean, the question is, why is Israel-Palestine is more interesting for many people in the international community, so to speak, in the international academia, so to speak, than many other conflicts in the world. I mean, there was a civil war in Syria with much more, casualties. There was a civil war in Sudan with much more casualties. But Israel-Palestine is an issue, and it's not. I mean, and sometimes it seems like it's not about human life. It's not about human life, because if you care about human life, why to focus on Israel-Palestine? And if it's not human life, what is it? What is it in our conflict? And I am participant in this conflict in many hats. Yeah, I served in the Israeli army, the occupied territories. So I'm part of this conflict. So why? And unless you have good answer to this question, we're in a problem. Because unless you have a good answer to this question, your involvement is destructive rather than positive. And destructive, when I say destructive, is destructive to both sides. I mean, this is the way I see it. The way I see it is that what is destructive to both sides, and what is positive to both. You cannot, I mean, the idea of being pro-Israeli and anti-Palestinian, or pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli, for me it's wrong. I know that this is, the common sense, but no, because we are two people in the same land. You cannot, what do you think? What can happen? There are 7 million Jews and 7 million Arabs between the sea and the river, between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. So how can you be anti one of them? What does it mean to be anti one of them? So the question to international students, to people who are not involved, for people who, for them, this is a symbol of or should be a symbol of justice. I want answers to this question. And if any of you would help me with that, I would be, it was all the 5 hours flight to Amsterdam in a very narrow chair.
Yeah, we have time for more audience questions. So yeah, here in the front.
Realistically, how do you think both sides can kind of accept that this fantasy of defeat isn't possible given this power imbalance? Like when one is a state that is funded by so many states all around the world, getting the most advanced military equipment with the sole purpose of defeating the other side, and I mean, you actually see them doing it. Don't you say that there's a bit of a disparity, and maybe it'll be harder for both sides to accept?
I think that that Israel cannot defeat the Palestinians, despite the fact that you mentioned. What is happening now in the last 5 days? Oh, that Israelis are exposed to the fact that Israel couldn't defeat Hamas battalions in Gaza after killing so many people there. It's unbelievable. I mean, there are limits to what brutal power can do. So I don't know if we would learn this lesson or not. Not sure. But I think that this is a lesson that can be learned now. I mean, that you cannot defeat the Palestinian people. I think it's quite clear. Now, the part of the problem, continue what you said, is the position of the Arab countries, that they didn't stand along the Palestinians strongly. What happened behind, closed doors, we don't know. Sometimes it's intelligence cooperation with Israel, but sometimes it's something else. We have some clues, but we don't know. So in one sense, Israel is very, very strong, but in the other sense, Israel is a tiny state in the Middle East surrounded by hundreds of millions of Muslims. So we have two kinds of balances of power here. So this is a source of, maybe way to relax. I mean, to relax from the fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we have the microphone once more?
So, how do you think that the Israeli side specifically can kind of accept that they can't defeat the other side? Because I agree with what you're saying. At least they've seen that they weren't able to wipe out Hamas, but they did do significant damage in, the past year and wiped out homes, people, all of those things. So you can also argue, no, they were successful. They got rid of all of those people. They got rid of all of those places. They could argue that they were successful. And as well, when the international community doesn't condemn all of the atrocities that's been going on, and when the only solution to this, or not sorry, solution, response to this is they keep getting funded, keep getting weapons, how are they going to believe that they can't defeat it when they're constantly being pumped with all of this money, all of these people telling them, keep doing what you're doing, you can keep doing it? How are they going to accept that they can't?
Just because they can't. I mean, because, okay, they got all this. If you listen now to voices in the last 3-4 days in Israel, it's not that they say, okay, we have to make peace with the Palestinians because we didn't defeat them, but they say, okay, in this war, the two sides lost it. I mean, there was no victory. There was no Israeli victory. There was no Palestinian victory. Okay, two sides were defeated and not defeated. Now, the problem is now, or another problem, or the very problem is that the question is whether you can make Israelis believe that there is any way to live in peace with Palestinians, and to make Palestinians believe that there is any way to live in peace, and to make them want to live in peace. Here we are in a much more severe situations that we had been 2 years ago. But 2 years ago also they didn't want to negotiate. So what can we say now when every side look at the other side as, not human beings anymore, murderers and so on. So it's not that I'm optimistic or whatever, but I think that out of this despair, maybe something might happen. I don't promise anything, even to me.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the audience questions. If we continue looking at what is happening right now, Netanyahu is currently under immense pressure by his far-right ministers, with Ben-Gvir resigning in opposition to the ceasefire deal. Arguably, to get his far-right minister to agree, he had to give them a freer hand in West Bank as well. So at the same time, the future governance of Gaza is unclear. Are you optimistic that this ceasefire will really be the beginning of more peaceful relations in Israel-Palestine?
I thought we decided not to ask questions about the future.
We said we have little time for it.
Okay, but I said that I wouldn't answer. You remember that you can ask whatever you want?
You said we had little time for it, but there is no real answer.
Yeah. Difficult to
Okay,
answer.
the problem with the future, I tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you ask, it's one thing. In Israel, I give lectures sometimes, and people ask me, so what will happen? What will happen? What will happen? And what I say is, to Israelis, I don't know if it's true for you, and to Palestinians, I say the same. I don't say it's true for you. I say the future is not, it's not something that is written, and experts have to find with a crystal what will happen. No, what will happen is what we will do. This is what will happen. So if you do shit, you'll get shit. If you do better, you'll get better. This is we cannot know more than that. I cannot know more than that. Sorry.
I think that also ties into that many people think historians can actually predict what will happen. Well, that is, of course, very difficult indeed. So you see that many people here care deeply about the conflict. So in your view, how should students engage with this incredibly complex topic?
I think I gave the basics of this already, and I'll tell you. I tell it again. If we start from very basic human values, that every people have the right to live peacefully with dignity in his homeland, and we accept it, and this is a start. I mean, and to be pro and not to be against. I mean, it's very difficult. There is war, and Israelis, they fight against Palestinians, Palestinians against Israelis. So if you're pro-Israel, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It cannot work. Because you also cannot defeat Israelis or Palestinians. I don't know if you are more pro-Israelis or pro-Palestinians. You cannot defeat them. We are there. We live there. What you can, if you can help in something, is to create atmosphere in which Israelis and Palestinians can listen to each other and live peacefully with each other. Not to tell Israelis, you are colonizer. Okay, I'm colonizer. Okay, my father came to Israel from Afghanistan to colonize Palestine. Okay, so what should I do? In what sense it tells me something about what should be done? My mother, she came from Poland. In what sense this fact has to do with better life for Palestinians and Israelis? In what sense? Okay, we know history. We know where people came from. We know that Zionism is, in a sense, settler colonialism. Okay, everything we can know. We know a lot of things about Palestinians as well. Who came from where and why and when. Okay, we are there. The solution is even not a good word, but the future. We want better future or not. The better future is to kill more or to kill less, to give more freedoms or less freedoms. What are we talking about? So this is a discourse that I think can create better atmosphere, first of all, among the international people who are interested in Israel-Palestine, and maybe also among Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, discourse which is not about, okay, we came to debate, and I'm stronger because I have better rhetoric abilities. No, this is not the point. We don't want to defeat you, not in a debate and not in the battlefield. We want to live. This is the message, I think. And people, of course, Israel tell me, you are naive because you know what is Islam. You know the Quran. You read the Quran. You know that in the Quran is written that you have to kill the Jews. I said, no, I read the Quran. It's not written in the Quran. Okay, this is another story. The images that we have about the other.
Yeah.
But the point is, as I said, when you speak like this, you are portrayed as a naive person. Okay, let the naive people rule. So maybe this is a solution.
This is a good way to end, I think.
Yeah, I think humility would also be a good virtue when engaging with this complex history. So thank you so much for joining us today, Hillel. It has been a real pleasure, and thank you all for listening today.
Yeah. Although this marks the end of our series on Israel-Palestine, don't worry. Room for Discussion has a lot more also interesting interviews coming up. On the 5th of February from 3 to 4, we will host Ruben Breckelmans, the Dutch Minister of Defense. And on the 12th of February from 1 to 2, we will have Martin Wolf, who is the Chief Economics Commentator of the Financial Times. And we hope to see you there. But for now, let's give a round of applause to Hillel Cohen.